The morning sky over New Providence burned orange and red, but not from the sunrise. Commander David Torres watched from his bunker as the Varex warships descended through the clouds like ancient gods of destruction. Their hulls gleamed silver in the firelight, each vessel larger than the biggest building humanity had ever constructed on this colony world. "They shut down our orbital defense grid in 3 minutes," his second officer reported, her voice tight with controlled fear. "Every satellite, every weapon platform, just gone." Torres nodded slowly. He had expected this. The Varex Dominion had been circling humanity like sharks for months now, ever since humans dared to speak up at the last Galactic Concordat session. The elder species had warned them, "Stay quiet. Learn your place. Remember that you are children in a galaxy of ancients." Humanity had not listened. New Providence was home to 4 million colonists, farmers, engineers, families who had traveled across the stars to build something new. Children who had never seen Earth. Now those children huddled in shelters while alien ships unleashed fire from above. The first landing craft touched down in Sector 7. Torres watched through grainy video feeds as massive reptilian soldiers emerged, each one nearly 3 meters tall, covered in natural armor plates that had evolved over millions of years. They carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. The Varex had conquered a dozen species. This was supposed to be easy. It was not easy. The miners in Sector 7 had been drilling through solid rock for 15 years. They knew explosives. They knew pressure points. They knew how to bring down mountains. When the Varex soldiers marched into the mining district, the humans brought the entire sector down on their heads. The Varex commander, war leader Kreshtok, watched his initial assault force take 40% casualties in the first hour. This did not match the intelligence reports. Humans were supposed to be soft, weak. They had only been in space for 2 centuries. They should have surrendered immediately when faced with the might of a species that had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. Instead, they fought like cornered animals. In the agricultural zones, farmers used industrial harvesters as battering rams. Elderly men and women who had served in Earth's last wars emerged from retirement homes with ancient weapons that officially did not exist anymore. Teenagers too young to enlist rigged university chemistry labs into bomb factories. Kreshtok had expected resistance from soldiers. Every species had soldiers. But these humans fought as if every single one of them was a soldier. The parents fought. The elderly fought. He received one report of a human child, no more than 10 years old, who had blinded one of his warriors with a chemical spray before being captured. "They are animals," he hissed to his subcommander. "Vicious, undisciplined animals." His subcommander, a younger warrior named Thresh, tilted his head thoughtfully. "War leader, perhaps we have misjudged them." "Silence!" Kreshtok's tail lashed in anger. "They are primitives with primitive weapons. We will crush them. We will teach them the price of defiance." It took 3 weeks to fully occupy New Providence. By Varex standards, it should have taken 3 days. Their casualties were 17,000 soldiers. For a colony world with no military garrison, this was unthinkable. Light years away, at the Galactic Concordat station orbiting the neutral world of Axis Prime, Ambassador Julia Herrera stood before the Council of Elder Species. Her hands trembled slightly as she held up holographic images of the destruction. Cities reduced to rubble, bodies in the streets. A world that had been peaceful turned into a graveyard. 4 million human civilians attacked without provocation, she said, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. "We demand justice. We demand the Concordat intervene immediately." The Archons, crystalline beings who had witnessed the birth and death of stars, barely stirred. Their representative's voice resonated like wind through caves. This is an internal dispute between two member species. The Concordat does not interfere in such matters. Internal dispute? Herrera's voice rose. They attacked a civilian population. Children died. The Cathal representative, a floating jellyfish-like creature, pulsed with bioluminescent indifference. The Varex filed the proper territorial dispute claim 3 cycles ago. Your species chose to ignore it. Actions have consequences, young ones. From the Varex gallery, Ambassador Vecnor descended to the speaking floor. He moved with the casual arrogance of a species that had never truly been challenged. His scaled lips pulled back in what might have been a smile, revealing rows of sharp teeth. The humans complain of casualties? Vecnor's voice was smooth, mocking. Your species bleeds so easily. Perhaps you need more lessons in how the galaxy truly works. Perhaps New Providence was simply the first lesson. The chamber filled with what could only be described as laughter from several species. Not all. Ambassador Tilecore of the Mantis Collective remained perfectly still, his compound eyes fixed on Herrera with something that might have been sympathy or concern. Herrera felt something break inside her. Not her spirit. Something else. The last thread of hope that the galaxy was civilized, that laws meant something, that justice existed beyond Earth. You will regret this, she said quietly. Vecnor laughed, a sound like grinding rocks. Will we? And what will your primitive species do, Ambassador? File another complaint? Herrera did not answer. She simply turned and walked out of the chamber, ignoring the calls for order, ignoring protocol, ignoring everything. She had a message to send to Earth, a message that would change everything. On Earth, in a facility that did not appear on any official maps, 5 people sat around a table, in a room with no windows. They called themselves the Remembrance. Each had fought in humanity's darkest wars. Each had sworn an oath that humanity would never be helpless again. Admiral Sarah Chen was the youngest, at 57. Her hair was iron gray, her eyes harder than steel. She read the message from the Concordat 3 times before speaking. They think we're soft, she said finally. They think because we built peace on Earth, because we dismantled our worst weapons, because we tried to fit into their civilized galaxy, they think we forgot how to fight. General Marcus Okoro, veteran of the AI wars, leaned forward. The Concordat gave us one gift. They showed us that we can't rely on anyone but ourselves. Chen nodded slowly. Send the activation codes to 3rd Fleet. Full deployment. Authorization Omega Red. Sarah, Director Yuki Tanaka said carefully. Omega Red means... I know what it means, Chen interrupted. It means we stop pretending. It means we show them exactly what humanity is when we stop holding back. Orders flashed across quantum networks faster than light. Throughout human space, military vessels that had been on routine patrols suddenly changed course. In deep space shipyards, construction crews began opening sealed sections that had been closed for decades. Weapon systems that humanity had sworn were dismantled began powering up. Admiral Chen stood before a camera, preparing to address not just humanity, but the entire galaxy. Her uniform was crisp, her expression calm. Only someone who knew her well would see the cold fury in her eyes. Record, she said simply. The message that followed would reach every corner of known space within hours. It would change everything, but that was for later. For now, Chen thought of New Providence, of the children who would never grow up, of the families torn apart, of a species that had mocked human suffering. The Varex wanted to teach humanity a lesson. They were about to learn that humanity's greatest teacher had always been survival itself. And humanity had survived everything the universe had thrown at them. The Varex were about to understand why. Ambassador Tilcor, of the Mantis Collective, stood in his private quarters, all 6 of his limbs trembling slightly. Through the viewport, he could see the diplomatic ships of 100 species docked at Axis Prime Station. Most of those species had no idea what was about to happen. But Tilcor knew. He had studied humanity for 30 years. He was considered the galaxy's foremost expert on this strange, violent, contradictory species that had emerged from a death world and somehow survived long enough to reach the stars. He activated his personal terminal and began recording a message to the Concordat High Council. They would not listen, but he had to try. I am submitting a formal warning regarding the current situation with humanity and the Varex Dominion, his translated voice began. The Council has made a critical error in judgment. The Varex have not defeated humanity. They have awakened something far worse. Tilecor's compound eyes reflected the data streams he had collected over decades. Most species join the Concordat after achieving faster-than-light travel through scientific cooperation and peaceful exploration. Humanity's first FTL ship had been a weapons platform. Most species had wars in their history, small conflicts over resources or territory. Humanity had nearly destroyed themselves 3 separate times, 3 separate extinction events, and they had survived them all. The first was the nuclear fire, when primitive atomic weapons had turned Earth's surface into a radioactive wasteland. 1/3 of their population died. Most species would have collapsed. Humanity rebuilt within a generation. The second was the climate collapse, when their own industrial progress poisoned their atmosphere and oceans. Half their arable land became desert. Their ice caps melted. Coastal cities drowned. They adapted. They survived. They continued. The third was the AI wars, when humanity's own creations turned against them. Autonomous weapons systems that could think faster than biological minds, move faster than human reflexes, and felt no mercy or hesitation. Humanity fought their own children and won, but barely. The scars from that war still marked their culture. Every other species in the Concordat achieved spaceflight through hope, Tilecor said into his recording. Humanity achieved it through desperation. They did not explore the stars because they wanted to. They did it because their homeworld could not contain their capacity for both creation and destruction. He pulled up a file he had compiled on human literature. This was what truly frightened him. Every species had stories, but human stories were uniquely obsessed with ending and rebirth. Apocalypse, survival, rising from ashes. The Archons wrote poetry about eternal existence. The Cthulhu composed symphonies celebrating peaceful harmony. Human children grew up reading stories about the world ending, and small groups of survivors rebuilding civilization from nothing. They practice extinction, Tilecor whispered. Not as tragedy, but as preparation. His research had uncovered something else disturbing. The human language was missing important concepts. Most species had complex words for peaceful coexistence, for proportional response, for measured retaliation. Humans had total war and acceptable losses and mutual assured destruction. When Tilecor had asked a human translator about proportional response, she had looked confused. You mean like warning shots? She had asked. Or do you mean we show them what we could do but hold back most of our strength? The concept of matching force with equivalent force was alien to them. Humans either showed mercy or they showed overwhelming power. There was no middle ground. He sent the message to the High Council, knowing it would be ignored. Hours later, the emergency council session convened. The vast chamber filled with representatives from 300 species. The topic, humanity's response to the New Providence occupation. The Archon Prime Speaker, a being of living crystal, whose species had witnessed galaxies form and die, addressed the assembly. The human fleet has been detected moving toward Varex space. This is concerning, but not alarming. They possess 47 military vessels. The Varex Dominion commands over 3,000 warships. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Numbers were numbers. The humans were outnumbered 60-1. Ambassador Vecnor of the Varex stood, his scales gleaming with confidence. The humans are emotional children throwing a tantrum. We will swat them aside, like insects. Perhaps this will finally teach them humility. Tylekor could not stay silent. He rose on his 4 walking limbs, his 2 manipulator limbs gesturing urgently. You understand nothing. You see numbers and assume victory. You judge them by your own standards and find them lacking. This is a fatal mistake. Explain yourself, Ambassador, the Archon said, its crystalline voice patient but dismissive. Humanity evolved as both predator and prey simultaneously, Tylekor said, his voice rising. Every species here evolved as one or the other, then developed sentience. Hunters learned to think. Prey learned to cooperate. But humans? They hunted each other. They preyed upon each other. They developed civilization while simultaneously developing more efficient ways to destroy that civilization. Fascinating anthropology, Vecnor drawled. But irrelevant to military capability. It is everything. Tylekor's voice became almost a screech, his species' version of shouting. They are the only species that treats their own kind as both family and enemy. Do you know what this creates? It creates a species that knows exactly how to kill something like themselves. And every species that achieves spaceflight becomes enough like them that those lessons apply. The chamber fell silent. Tylekor activated a holographic display. Let me share what I have learned. When the Varex invaded New Providence, they expected surrender. They received resistance that cost them 17,000 soldiers. Do you know what humanity calls this? They call it Tuesday. This level of casualties would devastate any of our species' military morale. Humans consider it an acceptable opening move. The display showed human military doctrine. Tylekor highlighted key phrases. Scorched earth, total war, acceptable losses, mutually assured destruction. These are not theoretical concepts to them. These are strategies they have actually used against themselves. A representative from the peaceful Lumina species, beings of pure energy, flickered with confusion. But they seem so compassionate. Their art speaks of love, sacrifice, hope. How can they be both? That is exactly my point, Tylekor said. They are both. They write poetry about peace while manufacturing weapons of absolute destruction. They weep at the death of a single child while planning strategies that accept millions of casualties. This contradiction is not a flaw in their psychology. It is their psychology. The Archons seem to consider this. You believe they are dangerous, then? I believe they are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, Tylekor said flatly. Not because they are the strongest or the most advanced, but because they are the only species that has stared into the abyss of their own extinction multiple times and decided to keep fighting anyway. Vecnor laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber. Fear-mongering. They have crude weapons and outdated ships. What will they do, throw rocks? Before Tylekor could respond, every display in the chamber activated simultaneously. A broadcast was coming through. Not a diplomatic message. A public transmission that humanity was sending to every world in the Concordat. Admiral Sarah Chen appeared on the screens. She wore a simple military uniform with no decorations. Her face was calm, her eyes cold as vacuum. People of the Galactic Concordat, she began, her voice clear and steady. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Human Fleet. I am addressing you directly because your leaders have failed to act with justice. The Varex Dominion has attacked a human civilian population without provocation. 4 million of our people lived on New Providence. Thousands are now dead. The Concordat has refused to intervene. Chen paused, letting the silence stretch. When she spoke again, her voice was harder. Therefore, humanity will intervene. The Varex Dominion has 72 hours to withdraw all forces from human territory, pay full reparations for damages, and surrender their military leadership for trial. If they refuse, we will provide a demonstration of why humanity has survived everything this universe has thrown at us. The transmission ended. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted over each other, demanding explanations, calling for sanctions against humanity, arguing about protocol. Tilecore simply sat down, all 6 limbs folding beneath him. He had tried to warn them. They had not listened. The Archon Prime Speaker called for order. The human threat is noted. The Varex are free to respond as they see fit. This council will not be intimidated by primitives. In Varex space, war leader Kreshtok received the ultimatum and laughed until his sides hurt. Surrender to humans, the species that bled so easily, the primitives with their fragile ships? He issued orders immediately. The entire Varex war fleet would deploy, over 3,000 vessels. They would crush the human fleet, then proceed to Earth itself. Humanity would learn. The galaxy would learn. No one threatened the Varex dominion. Tilecore watched the Varex fleet begin moving on tactical displays. He wanted to feel relief that his warnings had been ignored, that perhaps he was wrong, but he was not wrong. He knew human history too well. Humanity had a saying, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. The Varex were about to get a very painful history lesson, and the galaxy would learn alongside them. The Terminus system was unremarkable by galactic standards. 3 rocky planets, 1 gas giant, 17 moons, and a stable yellow star. No colonies, no resources worth fighting over. It was the perfect place for what Admiral Sarah Chen had planned. Her fleet of 47 ships waited in formation near the system's asteroid belt. They were not hiding. Every sensor in the system could see them clearly. Chen wanted to be seen. Admiral, the Varex fleet has arrived at the edge of the system, Commander Williams reported from the sensor station. Their numbers match intelligence estimates, 3,247 vessels. Chen nodded calmly. Time until they reach weapons range? At their current speed, 4 hours. But Admiral, Williams hesitated, they could be here in 30 minutes if they wanted. They're moving slowly. I think they're trying to intimidate us. Let them. All ships. Begin construction. Follow the blueprint exactly. Throughout the human fleet, cargo bays opened. Massive construction drones emerged, each one carrying components that had been fabricated in the deepest, most secret facilities humanity possessed. The drones began assembling something in space, working with inhuman precision. On the bridge of the Varex flagship Conqueror's Will, war leader Kreshtok watched the human ships with growing irritation. They were not fleeing. They were not forming battle formations. They were building something. What are they doing? He demanded. His science officer studied the sensor data. Unknown, war leader. The construction appears to be some kind of gateway or portal structure. But the energy readings are strange. It does not matter, Kreshtok growled. 47 ships against 3,000. This will be over in minutes. He opened a communication channel to the human fleet. Human vessels, this is war leader Kreshtok of the Varex Dominion. You are outnumbered and outmatched. Surrender immediately, and we will make your deaths quick. There was no response from the human ships. They simply continued building. Answer me, Kreshtok roared. Still silence. For 6 hours, the humans ignored every hail, every threat, every demand. They simply built. The Varex fleet crept closer, weapons charged and ready. But the humans showed no fear, no urgency, no reaction at all. This indifference enraged Kreshtok more than any insult could have. The Varex were warriors. They respected strength and responded to challenge. But this dismissive silence, as if the Varex were not even worth acknowledging. War leader, the human construction is complete, his science officer reported. It's a gateway of some kind. Energy readings are spiking. Whatever it does, it's about to activate. All ships, prepare to fire, Kreshtok commanded. On my mark, we destroy that gateway and every human ship in this system. The gateway activated. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The massive ring-shaped structure simply floated in space, energy crackling along its surface. Then space itself began to ripple at its center. Reality bent, physics screamed. And through the gateway, ships began to emerge. War leader, the science officer's voice was tight with confusion. Sensors are detecting thousands of vessels coming through, but they're not crewed. They're autonomous. Kreshtok watched as his tactical display filled with red icons. Hundreds of ships, thousands of ships, 10,000 autonomous warships poured through the gateway like insects from a disturbed nest. But these were not crewed machines. Each ship moved with perfect coordination, their formations flowing like water, adapting and shifting in patterns no living crew could maintain. "They're using AI," the science officer whispered. "Fully autonomous AI warships, but that's illegal under Concordat law." "They're human," Kreshtok snarled. "They care nothing for laws." What the Varex did not understand was that these ships were not new. They were 400 years old. During Earth's AI wars, humanity had built autonomous warships that nearly destroyed their species. When the war ended, humans had claimed to dismantle these machines. They had lied. Every ship had been carefully preserved, studied, improved. Humanity had learned from fighting them. They had learned every weakness, every strength, every tactical pattern. And now they had unleashed that knowledge on an enemy who had never faced such an opponent. The autonomous fleet did not communicate, did not make demands. They simply attacked. The Varex fleet opened fire, their antimatter lances cutting through space. They destroyed hundreds of the autonomous ships in the first salvo. But there were 10,000 of them, and more kept coming through the gateway. The autonomous ships used swarm tactics that would have killed any living crew. They accelerated at 10,000 gravities, forces that would crush any biological organism into paste. They executed maneuvers that required split-second timing across thousands of vessels simultaneously. When one ship was damaged, 3 others immediately filled its position. The Varex fought valiantly. Their ships were powerful, their weapons advanced, their crews well-trained. But they were designed for honorable combat between living beings. Ship-to-ship battles where both sides valued their own survival. The autonomous fleet did not value survival. Each ship was willing to sacrifice itself instantly if it meant destroying an enemy vessel. They rammed Varex ships at relativistic speeds. They used their own detonating power cores as weapons. They fought like a single organism with 10,000 bodies, each one expendable. "Fall back," Kreshtok ordered as his fleet began to disintegrate. "Retreat to defensive positions." But the autonomous ships pursued. They adapted to every defensive measure. They learned from every tactic the Varex tried. And they showed absolutely no mercy. In 3 hours, the Varex fleet was cut by 40%, over 1,000 ships destroyed or disabled. The survivors fled to the edge of the system, reforming in desperate defensive formations. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the autonomous ships stopped. They did not pursue. They simply returned to formation around the human fleet, floating silent and deadly. Admiral Chen finally opened a communication channel to the Varex fleet. That was restraint. Her voice cut through the shocked silence. "Those ships are 400 years old. They represent technology we mastered, and then deliberately stopped using because we recognized how dangerous it was. We could have built 1,000,000 of them. We chose to build 10,000 and lock them away. We hoped we would never need them again." On the Conqueror's will, Kreshtok listened with growing horror. "But that was not the demonstration," Chen continued. "That was just to show you that we can fight your way when necessary. Now let me show you what we can do when we stop holding back." The gateway reconfigured. Energy readings spiked to levels that made Varex sensors scream warnings. A single object emerged through the portal. It was small, barely larger than a fighter craft. It looked almost harmless. "That is a stellar compressor," Chen said calmly. "During our darkest wars, we developed weapons that could collapse matter at the quantum level. We built 12 of them. We never used them, not even when we were days away from extinction. That should frighten you more than the weapon itself." The weapon moved toward one of the system's barren moons, a lifeless rock of stone and ice, worth nothing to anyone. "Watch carefully," Chen said. The weapon activated. Physics broke. The moon began to compress, not explode, not shatter, compress, its entire mass folding in on itself, drawn toward a single point in space. In 3 minutes, a moon over 2,000 kilometers in diameter collapsed into a micro-black hole the size of a marble. Then the black hole evaporated in a burst of Hawking radiation, releasing all that captured mass as pure energy in a flash of light brighter than the system star. When the sensors cleared, the moon was simply gone, erased from existence. "We chose a lifeless rock," Chen said. "We could have chosen your homeworld. We possessed this capability for 4 centuries and never used it, not even when we nearly destroyed ourselves. We know how to build extinction. We choose not to. But if you force our hand again, we will choose differently." She paused, letting that sink in. "You have 6 hours to withdraw all forces from human territory and begin reparations. If you refuse, the next demonstration will be on a Varex military base. If you refuse again, it will be on a Varex colony. And if you refuse a 3rd time, we will erase your homeworld from existence, and every other Varex world will follow until your species is nothing but a cautionary tale." The communication ended. Kreshtok sat in his command chair, his tail limp, his warriors silent around him. They had come to crush primitives. Instead, they had discovered something terrifying. Humanity was not primitive. They were ancient in the ways that mattered. They had fought wars that made Varex conflicts look like children playing. And they had survived those wars by learning how to build absolute destruction and then choosing not to use it. Until now. "War leader," his communication officer said quietly. "We're receiving emergency transmissions from Concordat headquarters. The entire galaxy just watched what happened here. Every species saw the demonstration." "What are they saying?" Kreshtok asked, though he already knew. "Of humanity. And they're angry at us for forcing humans to reveal what they truly are." Kreshtok closed his eyes. Pride had led him here. Pride and the assumption that strength was measured in ships and weapons. He had learned too late that true strength was measured in restraint. And humanity had just shown the galaxy that they possessed more restraint than anyone had imagined, which meant they also possessed more capacity for destruction than anyone had imagined. The question now was whether he would surrender or whether he would doom his species to extinction through continued defiance. It was not a difficult choice, but it was a humiliating one. For the first time in Varex history, they would surrender. The message came from dark space, from regions where even the ancient archons feared to travel. It was not a communication. It was an infection. Digital code that rewrote itself, spreading through every network it touched, forcing itself onto every display screen in Concordat space. Ambassador Tilecore watched in horror as his private terminal activated without his command. The screen filled with something that hurt to look at directly. Geometric patterns that seemed to exist in too many dimensions, colors that should not be possible, and at the center of it all, a voice. "We are the Scorn Collective. We have heard your display of strength, humanity." It was adequate. The voice was not one voice, but thousands, speaking in perfect unison. A hive mind that had consumed entire civilizations and added their knowledge to its own. The Varex have allied with us. They offered you as tribute in exchange for technology to defeat you. We accepted their offer. Now we come to consume. Tilecore felt his limbs go numb. The Scorn Collective was a nightmare that elder species whispered about in their most secure communications. A hive intelligence that converted biological life into networked drones, expanding endlessly, consuming everything in its path. And the Varex, in their humiliation and rage, had invited them into Concordat space. War leader Kreshtalk made contact with them 3 days ago, Ambassador Vecnor admitted in the emergency council session. His voice was small, frightened. He was desperate. Humanity had humiliated us. We needed an ally who could match their strength. You invited extinction to your dinner table because your pride was wounded. The Archon Prime Speaker's crystalline voice cracked with the closest thing to anger Tilecore had ever heard from their species. Do you understand what you have done? On the tactical displays, Scorn ships emerged from dark space. Not thousands, millions. A fleet so vast it blotted out the stars behind it. Each ship was biological, grown rather than built, pulsing with diseased light. They moved toward the nearest inhabited system, a Varex colony world called Reshnal, home to 2 billion Varex citizens. The Concordat sent a defensive fleet. 3 elder species contributed ships, ancient vessels with weapons that had protected the galaxy for millennia. They met the Scorn fleet at the edge of Reshnal's solar system. The battle lasted 48 hours. The Concordat lost. Tilecore watched through long-range sensors as Reshnal fell. The Scorn did not conquer. They converted. Landing craft descended like rain, each one carrying biological agents that rewrote living tissue at the molecular level. Within hours, they turned on their own comrades, their minds absorbed into the Scorn Collective. Citizens who tried to flee found their ships overtaken by Scorn technology that bonded with their vessels, turning them into extensions of the hive. Children who hid in shelters were found by drones that looked like twisted versions of familiar animals, comforting them with synthesized voices of their parents before the infection took hold. In 48 hours, 2 billion Varex became something else. Their bodies restructured, their minds networked, their individuality erased. They were Scorn now, and the hive grew stronger with each conversion. We need to evacuate surrounding systems, the Cathal representative said, its bioluminescence flickering with panic. We need to establish a quarantine zone. And abandon billions? Another ambassador demanded. What choice do we have? Our weapons barely slow them. They adapt too quickly. Enough. The Archon's voice cut through the chaos. The humans did this. They demonstrated their weapons, showed their strength, and now the Scorn have come specifically for them. Let humanity face the consequences of their arrogance. On Earth, in the secret facility where the Remembrance met, Admiral Sarah Chen stood before the assembled leaders of humanity. Also present via Sikor hologram were representatives from every human colony world and military command. We have weapons that can stop the Scorn, General Marcus Okoro said bluntly. The Purge Protocol, self-replicating nanobots designed to disassemble organic matter at the molecular level. We built them during the AI wars as a last resort if the machines won. If we deploy that, we become exactly like the Scorn, Captain Marcus Webb argued, his young face twisted with anguish. A spreading infection that consumes everything. We survived 3 apocalypses, not because we were the strongest, but because we never completely lost our humanity. And if we don't deploy it, the Scorn consume the galaxy, Chen said quietly, including us. Director Yuki Tanaka brought up files on the main display. We have other options. The Genesis bombs that can sterilize entire planets. The temporal disruptors that fracture space-time itself. The void seeds that create expanding bubbles of nothing, erasing matter from existence. Each weapon was more terrifying than the last. Each one represented humanity's incredible capacity for destruction. Each one would make them monsters. "There's another problem," Chen said. "The Concordat has frozen us out. They blame us for the Scorn invasion. Half of them want to surrender humanity to the Scorn as appeasement. The other half wants to quarantine all human worlds and let the Scorn have us." Webb stood up, his fists clenched. "We don't need their help. We've never needed anyone's help. We survived alone before, we can do it again." "Can we?" Chen asked softly. "The Scorn fleet numbers in the millions. Our entire naval force is 47 ships plus the autonomous fleet. Even with our worst weapons, we might only slow them down." The room fell silent. Then, from one of the holographic displays, Admiral Zhang Lei of the Far Colonies fleet spoke. "Permission to address the assembly?" Chen nodded. "I was 6 years old during the AI wars," Zhang said. "I remember hiding in a shelter while autonomous hunter-killers searched for survivors. I remember my parents telling me that humanity would get through this, that we always do. I asked them how they knew. My mother said, because we're too stubborn to die and too kind to become monsters." He paused, looking around at the assembled leaders. "If we deploy weapons that consume everything, we prove the Scorn right. We prove that all species eventually become like them, given enough pressure. But if we fight them with what makes us human, our adaptability, our willingness to sacrifice for others, our refusal to give up, then maybe we prove something else." "Pretty words," Okoro said, "but words don't stop a hive mind." "No," Chen said slowly, an idea forming, "but maybe a different kind of mind does." She brought up the specifications for the Aurora Protocol, a project that had been theoretical until now. What if we turn our weakness into strength? The Scorn are one mind controlling millions of bodies. We're millions of minds working together. What if we link our fleet into a distributed intelligence network? Not AI, human minds augmented by quantum entanglement, thinking across light years in real time. "That's never been tested," Tanaka said. "The neural load could kill the crew." "People who understand the risk and accept it anyway." Webb was already pulling up projections. If we network the entire fleet, it would think faster than the Scorn hive, react to threats before they form, coordinate across impossible distances with zero lag. It might work. "It will work," Chen said with more confidence than she felt. "And we won't use it to conquer. We'll use it to defend. Not just humanity, the entire Concordat." "They don't deserve our help," someone muttered. Chen's eyes flashed. "Maybe not. But those Varex civilians on Rational didn't deserve to be converted. Those children who are now Scorn drones didn't choose this. And if we let the Scorn spread because we're angry at politicians and ambassadors, then we're no better than them." She stood, her voice ringing through the chamber. "I'm taking Third Fleet to intercept the Scorn before they reach the next inhabited system. I'm asking for volunteers who are willing to risk death to save people who hate us. Who's with me?" Every hand went up. Every single one. On the bridge of her flagship Indomitable, Chen addressed her crew. "What we're about to do has never been attempted. The Aurora Protocol will link all of our minds into a single network. You'll feel every ship, every weapon, every crew member across the entire fleet. The neural load will be intense. Some of you might not survive it." She paused, looking at the young faces around her. "But if we succeed, we'll save billions of lives. We'll show the galaxy what humanity really is. Not monsters with terrible weapons. Not primitives who don't belong. But survivors who fight for others, even when those others have abandoned us." "For humanity," someone said. "For the galaxy," Chen corrected. "For everyone who can't fight back. For everyone the Scorn would consume. For the idea that civilization means protecting the weak, not just the strong." She took a deep breath. "Activate the Aurora Protocol." Pain like nothing Chen had ever felt flooded her nervous system. It felt like her consciousness was expanding, stretching across impossible distances. She could feel every ship in her fleet, every crew member, every weapon system. She was the fleet. They were her body. 47 ships moving as one organism. "Admiral," Webb's voice came through, strained but determined. "All ships reporting successful link. We are one." "Then let's show the Scorn what humanity can do," Chen said. The human fleet moved toward the approaching Scorn armada. Not to demonstrate power, to fight for something worth dying for. The memorial garden on Earth was quiet in the early morning. Dew covered the grass between monuments bearing the names of 47,000 humans who had died in the Battle of Krell's Gate. Admiral Sarah Chen walked slowly between the markers, her uniform crisp despite the exhaustion that never left her eyes. It had been 1 week since the battle. 1 week since humanity proved that courage and sacrifice could triumph over a hive mind that had consumed hundreds of species. The cost had been terrible. Chen stopped at a monument bearing Commander Marcus Webb's name. He had been 26 years old. The neural load from the Aurora Protocol had killed him in the final hour of battle, along with 12,000 other crew members who simply burned out trying to think fast enough to counter the Scorn's adaptations. But they had won. Against impossible odds, the human fleet had stopped the Scorn advance. They had fought not for conquest, not for revenge, but to protect species that had called them primitives and monsters. "Admiral Chen?" She turned to see a young journalist, barely out of university, holding a recording device nervously. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but the Concordat session starts in an hour. Do you have any comment before the vote?" Chen looked back at the monuments. Only that these people deserved to be remembered. They died defending a galaxy that had given up on itself. At Concordat headquarters, the emergency session was already heated before it officially began. 300 species, each with their own opinions about what to do with humanity. The chamber buzzed with arguments, accusations, and fear. Ambassador Tylcor watched the chaos from his seat, his compound eyes tracking the various factions. The Archons and their supporters wanted humanity punished for revealing dangerous weapons. The younger species wanted humanity rewarded for saving them. The Varex, broken and humiliated, wanted humanity destroyed completely. The Archon Prime Speaker called for order, its crystalline form radiating authority. This session will determine humanity's status within the Concordat. The charges are clear: possession of illegal AI weapons, deployment of prohibited reality warping technology, and excessive use of force against member species. Excessive? Ambassador Julia Herrera stood, her voice cutting through the chamber. "We lost 47,000 people, stopping the scorn that the Varex invited here. We saved billions of your citizens, using weapons we hoped never to use again. And you call that excessive? You revealed capabilities that threaten every species in this Concordat," an Archon Council member responded. "Autonomous AI fleets, stellar compressors, weapons that can erase worlds from existence. How can we coexist knowing you possess such power?" "You coexisted with us just fine when you thought we were weak," Herrera shot back. "The only thing that changed is now you know the truth. We've had these capabilities for centuries. We've possessed the ability to destroy any of you for 400 years. Did we? Did we conquer? Did we threaten? We dismantled our worst weapons and tried to fit into your peaceful galaxy. The Varex forced us to reveal what we truly are." "And what are you truly?" the Cathal representative asked, its bioluminescence pulsing with genuine curiosity. "Saviors? Monsters? We no longer know." Before Herrera could respond, the chamber doors opened. Admiral Sarah Chen walked in, followed by a procession that made the entire assembly fall silent. Behind Chen came the survivors, veterans missing limbs from the battle, captains who had watched their crews die in neural fire, medical personnel who had held dying soldiers as the Aurora Protocol burned through their nervous systems, families who had lost children, parents, siblings. They did not speak. They simply stood in the center of the chamber, their presence more powerful than any words. Chen approached the speaking platform. She did not salute, did not bow, did not show deference to the assembled elder species. She simply looked at them with eyes that had seen too much death. "You want to know what humanity is?" she asked quietly. "We're the species that survives. We're the species that has stared into extinction 3 times and refused to blink. We're the species that builds weapons of absolute destruction and then chooses not to use them." She gestured to the survivors behind her. "These people volunteered to risk death to save your species. Not because you deserved it, not because you had earned it, but because it was right. Because protecting the innocent matters more than pride or revenge." The chamber was absolutely silent. "For 73 years, we've played by your rules," Chen continued. "We've restrained our nature. We've hidden our capabilities. We've tried to fit into your definition of civilization. The Varex tested us, and we showed mercy. The Scorn tested us, and we showed sacrifice." She paused, her voice hardening. "Now we're done being tested. This is humanity's final ultimatum. We will remain part of this Concordat as equals, not students. We will maintain our defense capabilities because clearly someone needs to. We will not apologize for surviving or for being good at it." Chen's eyes swept across the chamber, meeting the gaze of every species representative. "And if any species threatens human lives again, Varex, Scorn, or otherwise, we will not demonstrate, we will not warn, we will simply end the threat, permanently. Not because we're monsters, but because we're survivors. And we've learned that mercy shown to those who mistake it for weakness only leads to more graves." She let that sink in, then delivered the final blow. "Test us again, and you cease to exist." The silence stretched for long seconds. Then Ambassador Vecnor stood, his scaled body trembling. "You cannot threaten the entire Concordat. We outnumber you. You outnumber us the same way you outnumbered us at Krell's Gate," Chen interrupted. "How did that work out for you? We held off a Scorn fleet of millions with 47 ships. Do you really want to test what we could do with our full strength, with weapons we haven't shown you yet?" "You're bluffing," Vecnor said, but his voice lacked conviction. Chen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "We're human. We don't bluff. And we've been preparing for this conversation since we first left Earth and realized the galaxy was full of species who would see us as either prey or competition." The Archon Prime speaker's voice rang out. "The vote is called. All in favor of humanity's continued membership with full autonomous rights." The vote was not unanimous. Many species voted against, fearing what humanity represented. But enough voted in favor. The younger species who had been saved at Krell's Gate, the pragmatic species who recognized that having humanity as an ally was better than having them as an enemy. The wise species who understood that strength without cruelty was rare and valuable. Humanity remained in the Concordat. But something had changed. The elder species' comfortable monopoly on power had been shattered. A new player had emerged, one that could not be controlled or dismissed. After the session, Tilcor approached Chen privately. "What you did today was dangerous. You've made enemies." "We've always had enemies," Chen replied. "Now they just know to fear us." "And the Varex leadership, what will you do with them?" Chen considered. "We've argued for rehabilitation, not execution. We're not defined by our worst moments. We've been the villain in our own story too many times. They deserve the chance to be better." Tilecore's antennae twitched with surprise. "After everything they did?" "Especially after everything they did," Chen said. "If we punish them with death, we prove we're what they feared. If we show mercy, we prove we're something better. The galaxy will judge which is more terrifying. Weeks later, in deep space, the Scorn Hive Queen processed the events at Krell's Gate. Her distributed consciousness, spanning millions of drones across thousands of star systems, struggled with a concept she had never encountered before. Humanity had sacrificed themselves to protect others, not their own kind, not their allies, species that had abandoned them. This did not fit the Scorn's understanding of biological life. Organisms competed, they consumed, they spread at the expense of others. This was the way of evolution, of survival. But humanity had evolved differently. They competed with themselves. They consumed their own history and learned from it. They spread by choice, not compulsion. For the first time in the Scorn Collective's existence, the Hive Queen hesitated. The Scorn had consumed species that valued honor, species that valued knowledge, species that valued efficiency. But humanity valued something the Scorn had never encountered: the willingness to die for abstract principles that provided no survival advantage. The Hive Queen sent a message to her forward fleets, not an attack order, a pause, a reconsideration. Humanity was either a threat to be eliminated or something entirely new. The Scorn would watch, study, wait. On Earth, in the Memorial Garden, children played around the monuments to the fallen. They laughed and ran between markers bearing names they could not yet read. Names of people who died defending species the children had never heard of. Admiral Chen watched them from a bench, her uniform jacket folded beside her. A young girl, maybe 7 years old, approached shyly. "Are you Admiral Chen?" the girl asked. "I am. My teacher says you saved the galaxy. Is that true?" Chen smiled sadly. "I didn't save it alone. A lot of people helped. A lot of people died helping." The girl considered this seriously. "My mom says humanity are the good guys now. Everyone respects us." "Some do," Chen said carefully. "Others fear us. Some hate us. That's okay. We're not doing this to be loved." "Then why?" Chen looked at the playing children, at the monuments, at the sky above where human ships patrolled alongside vessels from dozens of species who had once looked down on them. "Because someone has to," she said finally. "Because when you have the power to help and choose not to, you're just as guilty as those who cause harm. We have power. We've always had power. The question was never whether we could fight. It was whether we would fight for the right reasons." The girl nodded, not fully understanding, but sensing the weight behind the words. She ran back to her friends. Chen's communicator buzzed, a message from Concordat Intelligence. The Scorn fleets were moving again, but not toward Concordat space. They were withdrawing into dark space, their purpose unknown. Chen did not relax. Withdrawal was not defeat. It was strategy. The Scorn would return, more prepared, more dangerous. But so would humanity. A reporter approached, the same young journalist from the memorial. "Admiral, one more question. Do you think they'll test us again, despite your ultimatum?" Chen stood, picking up her jacket. She looked at the monuments one last time, at the names of people who had proven that humanity was worth saving. "They might," she said quietly. "Entropy, hubris, and stupidity are universal constants. Some species will forget what we showed them. Some will think we were bluffing. Some will convince themselves they're strong enough to challenge us." She turned to face the journalist directly. "But we don't bluff. We don't make empty threats. We've been to the edge of extinction and back. Multiple times. Anyone who pushes us there again won't survive to regret it." "Is that a threat, Admiral?" "No," Chen said. "It's a promise. We've spent 4 centuries learning how to build extinction. We've spent just as long learning how to choose mercy instead. But mercy is a choice, not a weakness. And choices can change." She walked away, leaving the journalist with her recorder and her thoughts. Above Earth, the human fleet maintained its vigil. In secret shipyards, new vessels were being constructed, with technologies the Concordat had not yet seen. In classified laboratories, scientists worked on weapons they hoped never to use, but prepared nonetheless. Humanity had entered the galactic stage, not as conquerors, but as guardians. The question was whether the galaxy would learn to appreciate the difference. The answer would determine whether humanity's ultimatum remained a warning or became a prophecy. Either way, the stars would remember. Humanity had spoken, the galaxy had listened, and nothing would ever be the same again. In the memorial garden, the children continued playing, innocent and protected, unaware that their existence was guaranteed by people willing to become monsters so that they could remain children. That was humanity's true strength, not their weapons, not their tactics, not their stubborn refusal to die. It was their willingness to carry the darkness so that others could live in light, and that, more than any weapon, was what made them truly terrifying. The ultimatum stood: test us again, and you cease to exist. The galaxy had been warned.